Coming right up, Straight Talk with Art Levine. Our guest tonight, Dr. Craig Smith, Director of the Center for First Amendment Studies, discussing the Supreme Court nomination process.
Opinions expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Charter Communications nor its sponsors. We recognize our obligation to present opposing points of view by responsible spokespersons. For information, please contact the Director of Program.
She stands in the face of evil and will not lose hope or faith. America, the land of freedom, is still the home of the brave. So raise the banner, call no glory. Let us join our fellow man. History will write the story. America will always stand.
Straight Talk is brought to you in part by Southern California Edison. For over 100 years, life powered by Edison. The Press Telegram, your local news leader for over 100 years. And Long Beach Magazine. Coastal Living, City Style.
Join us for tonight's edition of Straight Talk. And now your host, Art Levine.
Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. We're delighted you're joining us tonight. Our guest, one of the most popular regular guests on the show, Dr. Craig Smith, the Director of the Center for First Amendment Studies here at California State University, Long Beach. Craig, welcome back to Straight Talk.
Good to be here again.
Craig is also the editor of a book coming out shortly, a First Amendment profile of the Supreme Court, coming out this summer, and we're here to discuss the Supreme Court nomination process, which is a fascinating process, Craig.
It is. You know, they make these people go through all kinds of hoops. The FBI has to vet you. Then the Senate Judiciary Committee has to vet you, and then you have to be voted on in the United States Senate.
We've divided this up into kind of three phases. First is the president has to scour the country to pick a nominee, and then, of course, it goes to the Senate Judiciary Committee for these fascinating hearings, and then the third piece is the final vote by the United States Senate, two-thirds vote to confirm or reject.
Just a majority.
Just a majority?
Yeah.
Okay. Two-thirds is for ambassadors and cabinet.
Treaties and
but only a majority for the Supreme Court.
That's right.
Okay. Well, how does the president select the nominee?
Well, one would hope that the president looks for some sort of balance on the Supreme Court, but the president also wants someone that represents his views on the Supreme Court. Evidently, from what we have learned, Barack Obama wants somebody on the Supreme Court that can stop the 5-4 division that's been occurring lately in many cases. He would like to see more consensus. 5-4 just means one vote flips and you reverse the whole decision.
And there were two recent important decisions changing long-standing existing law that were just 5-4, Miranda
right.
and campaign finance.
Right. The Miranda rule was just earlier, and what it did was it further restricted what rights that defendants had in terms of being read their rights. It said that you don't have to say that you don't want to say anything. All I have to do is read you your rights, and then if you confess, that's too bad for you.
So 5-4, it narrowed Miranda protection.
Right.
And of course, the campaign financing opened the gusher for money, which was a major change.
This was the Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission case. And again, it was 5 justices versus 4 justices, the 5 conservatives versus the 4 semi-liberals. But it overturned 100 years of precedent on a 5-4.
And your point is we should not be changing important law just 5-4. The
Right.
classic example, of course, was the Warren Court 9-0 Brown versus Board of Education.
Right, in
on
1954,
desegregation.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So the president has chosen Elena Kagan
Right.
as his nominee.
Yes.
And where does she stand in the grand scheme of things?
Well, you know, she's never been a sitting justice, so we don't know what kind of decision-making she's going to be engaged in. She is currently the Solicitor General for the president. Before that, she was dean at Harvard. Before that, she worked in the Clinton administration. But her reputation, both in the Clinton administration and in the Obama administration, is that she makes things happen, she brings people together, she's pragmatic.
She brought the faculty together at Harvard Law School.
Exactly, when she was dean. That she's a liberal, but a pragmatic one. Very much like the justice that she's going to replace if she gets approved. John Paul Stevens was a pragmatic kind of liberal, sometimes worked with the conservatives, sometimes with the liberals on the court. And I think that's what Barack Obama is looking for.
And of course, the selection of a Supreme Court justice is one of the most important and enduring legacies of a president, because the justice stays long after the president is out of office.
Oh, absolutely. You know, Earl Warren was appointed in 1953 and didn't leave until 1969. And Dwight Eisenhower said it was one of the worst things he ever did because he influenced so much policy for such a long time.
So it's a very, very important. Now let's, in the time we have left in this first segment, talk about the 2 competing judicial philosophies: judicial activism and restraint. Activism says that the court should be stepping to the forefront in making needed social changes, particularly when Congress is slow to act or doesn't act at all. The conservatives say what?
Well, the conservatives believe in reading the Constitution into its original context. What did the framers of the Constitution have in mind when they wrote it? And that's what we have to go by. And if you want to change that, then you need to amend the Constitution.
Or go to Congress or change the law through congressional.
Absolutely. Where the activists generally believe that the Constitution is a living, evolving document, and we need to reapply it as times change.
As a graduate of Yale Law School, we were in that second category. We believed in the living Constitution. But they're both respectable points of view. Justice Frankfurter, a classic example of a conservative, and now, of course, on the court, who would be the Anthony Scalia would be a classic conservative.
Anthony Scalia would be a conservative. Clarence Thomas would be a conservative. Anthony Kennedy would be a conservative. They have the majority, but barely.
Yeah. And Elena Kagan would fall where in that spectrum of activism versus conservative?
I think toward the middle, but on the activist side.
Yeah.
I think she's going to pursue a liberal agenda, but not one that is so radical that it offends the conservatives. She's going to try and pick off a conservative or two if she gets on the court and bring them over to the liberal side on some decisions.
Okay, we'll be continuing this fascinating discussion right after these messages. Stay with us.